on my screen. So assalamu alaikum to everyone, to the listeners, to the viewers, and to our esteemed panel at the moment, to Syed Saleh, Syed Abazar, and Sister Medina. And thank you again to Sister Fizza for the introduction. Today's program is designed so that we can obviously look at the destruction of Jannat al-Baqi and start to exchange perspectives, but most importantly, situate this event in the much wider context of Shia genocide and anti-Shia behavior, Shia phobia, the oppression to the followers of Ahl al-Bayt that we are seeing. These events are not in isolation, they are linked. And by gathering in this way, we can start to develop trends and highlight exactly what is the origin of our oppression, where does it come from, which ideologies have come together, which historical events are relevant. And only then we can start to find some sort of solutions, ideally for the community to follow, which can hit the main origin of our oppression. Because it may well be that the destruction of Baqi is very closely linked to the oppression of the Hazara people, which is linked to the oppression and the invasions of the countries in the Middle East where we are seeing other graves of Ahl al-Bayt. And certainly these are linked to countries outside of the Muslim hub. So Pakistan, Nigeria, all of these countries are linked. So in today's discussion, we'll begin by a series of small introductory remarks by our speakers. After me will be Sayyid Abadar, and then Sister Medina, and finally Sayyid Saleh. And then we will open up and ask each other questions on our remarks. I will, of course, have some thoughts to share, inshallah, with all of you. And if anyone listening would like to make any remarks, if you're in this Zoom call, please write in the chat if you have a question for the discussion. And similarly, if you are watching via Facebook Live right now, you can comment on the video, and Sister Fizza is monitoring, and she will tell us. And that way you can be part of this conversation. But to begin from my side, I will say that when we look at the destruction of Baqi, we have to factor in a number of different levels which are relevant to Shia genocide. On the one level, we might look at this ideologically. We might say, well, what thinkers and what theories are in play when so many of the Ahl al-Bayt's graves are barred from access for us? If we go through the ideological route, we'll come across a number of thinkers who have written on things like the impermissibility of visiting graves, or of the idea of shirk being related to grave visiting. And we'll come across names of historical and contemporary thinkers who it is their thought which is implemented in policy right now in Saudi Arabia. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah, the views that he has taught, the views that he has taught about the impermissibility of visiting graves. For example, if we go further, we might see Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and the impact he had on the land of Saudi Arabia. And if we go further, we find more contemporary thinkers like Maqdisi and Zawahiri, all of which have replicated the same kind of rhetoric and used it for oppression in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iraq or even Yemen or even Nigeria. So there is an ideological link between these events. But also it's a question of history. We can go back and look at key moments in history which help us understand why we are here and why we got here. For example, there is that most famous moment in 1744 in which the alliance between the family of Saud and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab happens for the first time in the land of Dir'iyah. And for the first time, the two are clashing together and joining forces, the ideology of Wahhabism and the family of Ali Saud. And from then onwards, we are seeing these views become policy. And gradually over time, inshallah, if our speakers can go through facts in history, we see these developments of anti-Shia oppression develop in terms of the universities and the institutions before it happens on the ground and it happens in oppression. So these are ways, and of course that led to the destruction of Karbala and so many events which happened after that. This is if we look at it historically, but also to finish, we can also look at it in terms of the role of Muslims in the West. You see, most people listening might be listening in America or in Canada or in the UK where I am. I think I'm the only British person representing in this panel, so I'll represent the British Isles the best I can. We have a special role here because the countries which we are born in are in some ways culpable in continuing Shia genocide, either directly or indirectly. Even the way that the map has been drawn in the Middle East comes from the Sykes-Picot Agreement, with French and British policymakers deciding who gets which part of a country they had never been to. For those of you who are looking at Palestine, this sounds very familiar, right? More than that, our countries have invaded the Middle East on multiple occasions. One of my thesis in university was on the invasion of Iraq by Britain. And it was found that if UK did not give support, it was very unlikely America would have even invaded in the first place. My country is culpable. And going forward, we have to look at the history of colonialism and see that where did our countries have an impact on the problems happening in Shia countries right now? One example which came across in my reading was that of Abdul Rahman Khan in Afghanistan. It turns out that Britain had supplied and funded an emir in Afghanistan who had such a violent anti-Hazara policy that from the 19th to the 20th century, half of the Hazara people were made essentially refugees in Balochistan. How is that disconnected from what's happening today in Kabul, for example? So these approaches help. And that's why we have many different perspectives and voices to give their approach for how we got here and why we are here. And to conclude, we have to have a forward-thinking, hopeful approach, because many of the things we're discussing don't need to remain like this. It's not the case that our Imam needs oppression in these countries for him to return. We have a role to prepare the grounds for his return. So we hope that the discussion we have is fruitful and productive, inshallah, and drawing on actions for people to follow and replicate in their homes. All right, that's me. Thank you for listening. If I can now turn to Syed Abazar Wahedy to continue to give your thoughts, inshallah, Syed. Firstly, Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, you are well, and thank you for joining this panel.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyina bil qasim al-Mustafa Muhammad. Salawatullah salamu alayhi wa ala ahli bayti at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin. So first of all, I would like to give my condolences for this, even though it's after the 8th of Shawwal, but still the main basically reason of holding this beautiful program is that there were so many good points that you made, alhamdulillah. And I would like to say special salam to Syed Saleh Qazwini. We never met each other, but alhamdulillah, we know each other through social media and stuff. Alhamdulillah. It's my pleasure, Sayyidina. So in my opinion, the 8th of Shawwal is a warning that actually that was the goal of Wahhabism. You know, before the 8th of Shawwal, what they did, before they attack and they damaged the Haram of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam, we have to think way beyond that. We have to think, what is the reason of that? They are following someone like Ibn Taymiyyah, that Ibn Jawzi, Suyuti, and so many other great Sunni scholars gave the fatwa of his kufr. And for hundreds of years, his books were in the shelves and they were full of dust and nobody would touch his books. And all of a sudden, someone like Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab comes and goes to the library and finds a book, and basically with the support of Al Saud, and of course with the support of Great Britain at that time, he basically spreads the message of takfir and qital of those who don't think like them, who don't believe the same as they believe. Remember, the Wahhabis don't only target the Shias, they target those who basically don't think like them, those who don't have the same belief, as them. When you read, there's a beautiful book, Uthman, what was his name? There's a great intellect. He is a Wahhabi. He calls himself. But I don't think he is Wahhabi. He has a book, Da'iya Laysa Nabiyya. He was a muballigh. He was a preacher, not a prophet. And that is about the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and he actually criticizes him. And then he shares his fatwas. He basically, one of his fatwas is that those who, like the farmers, for example, who don't have enough knowledge about religion is kafir and must be executed. That is one of his fatwas. And now they made that statement. They're saying you are basically following Ahlul Bayt, those who promote the culture of thinking. Alhamdulillah, there is no doubt. Even one of the things that, one of the reasons that Wahhabis criticize us is because we think We ask for reason. نحن أبناء دليل. We are the people of reasons, right? We say, okay, what is the reason? And I accept it. So this is one thing. Two, remember what happened basically after Baqi. They attacked Karbala, right? They destroyed the haram of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. They killed over 40,000 people. 40,000 people. They gave the fatwa of the kufr of the people of Medina. They had another genocide there, right? So it's in my opinion, this is a puzzle. Their goal is to promote the message of Wahhabism and Takfirism, and they want to have the same goal as ISIS. And they have the same. They say we don't believe in ISIS, but they're funding them. They're helping them. Why ISIS never attacked Saudi Arabia? Why? Why they never attack all these people? They focus on those people who basically who don't believe in Wahhabism, or they call themselves Ahlul Tawheed and all that. So you know what happened? Like, for example, the brother mentioned Afghanistan, right? So a few weeks ago, you saw what happened in a Sayyid al-Shahada Maktab, Sayyid al-Shahada school. There were a bunch of kids. But remember where that explosion took place. It was in the Shia area of Kabul, which is Dasht-e-Barchi. The year before, they attacked a hospital for pregnant ladies, those who deliver their babies in that hospital. That took place in the same area, Shia area, Dasht-e-Barchi. They killed newborn babies and the mothers. 4 years ago, they attacked a town, and their target, this is an untold story. So many people don't know. So many news and medias didn't cover this up, right? Didn't cover up. What was that? They attacked a town, and their target was the newborn babies, and they killed hundreds of them. You see what happens? The goal is to cleanse basically ethnical cleanse. They killed the Shias, and mainly Hazaras in Afghanistan, especially in Afghanistan. There were some attacks a few years ago in Kuwait. The Hazaras, those who migrated from Afghanistan to Pakistan, most of them went to Kuwait and Peshawar. And their target were Hazaras and Shias. So Baqi is the symbol. If we keep silence, if we don't say anything, if we don't criticize this cancer, the government of Saudi Arabia, this is a cancer, the most dangerous government for the world, in my opinion, and especially for the Shias, for Muslims, is Saudi Arabia government. What do you do for the cancer? Either you treat it or get rid of it. We need to wake up. This is enough. It's been so many of us, unfortunately, this is my last word. 8th of Shawwal, we commemorate. 8th of Shawwal, we commemorate. Okay, Ya Allah, what happened to the Haram of Ahlul Bayt? But every single Shia is a Haram of Ahlul Bayt. I am the Haram of Ahlul Bayt. You are the Haram of Ahlul Bayt. As long as you say Ya Ali, Ya Hussein, you go in ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt in Karbala, Najaf, anywhere, or you have the love of Ahlul Bayt in your heart, you are the Haram of Ahlul Bayt. When they insult Shias, when they kill Shias, they are actually destroying and damaging the Haram of Ahlul Bayt. The Haram of Ahlul Bayt are made by what? By rocks, steels, metals, right? But we are the Haram of Ahlul Bayt. Without us, the Haram of Ahlul Bayt are damaged. There is no visitor. They're targeting the main Haram of Ahlul Bayt, which are the Shias. We can't keep silence. We have to wake up. We have to talk. We have to write articles. 8th of Shawwal is happening every single day. It's not 90 something years ago. That is happening every single day. So inshallah, hopefully we wake up and try to let other people and spread this message to our community, and inshallah help each other, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the reappearance of Imam of our time. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajul sharif. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syed, for those beautiful remarks. I'm sure there are many things to unpack in the discussion after, but thank you for those remarks. Sister Medina, over to you. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I actually have a quick presentation. I'll try to condense as much as possible within the allowed time for opening remarks, but I think it'll help kind of set the tone for the discussion to follow and give us all a good foundation to start from. So with that, I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. And I will view. Okay. So again, I first want to thank the organizers for putting this event together and the other panelists for their time and their insights. I think these conversations are the first step in the learning process. So I'm truly humbled to be speaking with you all about the topic of structural anti-Shiism and Shia genocide from a more academic perspective in a global, broader context. So again, I've limited the presentation to more of a survey since this is a topic you can go really into depth with. But if there's ever any questions about the references or sources or things like that, I'd be happy to provide those as well. So with that, we're just going to dive in and begin by defining our terms and asking what systemic or structural anti-Shiism actually is. Like the Syed had mentioned previously, while this pattern of violence and discriminatory behavior has been historically ongoing, and it's actually been reported and written about to some extent, it was only officially defined by Shia Rights Watch, which is a nonprofit NGO, in 2011 as the hatred of, prejudice, discrimination, and/or violence against Shia Muslims because of their religious beliefs, traditions, and I know we'll get more to this in the discussion, cultural heritage, Jannat Baqi being a key example. And then I break it down further into 3 different categories, all of which are equally valid manifestations of systemic anti-Shiism: physical violence, discriminative policy, and cultural erasure. So physical violence in the form of kidnapping, torture, target killings, massacres, bombings, ethnic cleansings, and state-sanctioned executions. Discriminative policy in the form of more institutionalized methods such as governmental bans on the practice of Shiism, municipal orders to close specifically Shia masjids and centers, limited work opportunity, intolerance in schools, and even apartheid. And finally, cultural erasure in the form of the destruction of heritage sites and the suppression of Shia identity, like more specifically. So on this slide, I actually have some of the countries where anti-Shiism has been reported on, the names of the parties guilty of violence, and the motivation behind it that generally remains the same with little variation from case to case, as mentioned by Syed Abbas and Syed Abazar earlier. So just for a very quick rundown on some instances, just a few, of anti-Shiism throughout these cases. So in Iraq, the Camp Spiker massacre where Shia cadets were executed by ISIS. In Nigeria, where the government initiated a brutal crackdown on the Shia community led by Sheikh Zakzaki, which resulted in hundreds of the peaceful protesters being killed, including 6 of his own sons. The target killing of Shia professionals in Pakistan and the abandonment of healthcare when Shia patients are assigned to anti-Shia doctors. The executions of Sheikh Nimr in Saudi Arabia and many others who were labeled as terrorists extrajudicially. The torture of primarily Shia protesters in Bahrain who were imprisoned in the wake of the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings, the fact that it is literally illegal to be Shia in Malaysia, the vandalism of Shia mosques in Birmingham in the UK, the attack on the maternity ward, the tutoring center, and most recently a school, like the Syed had mentioned, in a predominantly Azara and Shia area in Kabul. France's Minister of the Interior specifically closing Shia masjids, campaigns to destroy Shia heritage sites in Syria and Iraq, the use of advanced surveillance technology in the UAE to prevent Shia organizing, and finally, programs of Turkey's Shia Alevi population, and of course, the bombing of Shia mosques in Kuwait. So now that we are aware of the overwhelming evidence from proving anti-Shiism and we know why it's important to address it, we ask, how can we understand it outside of these very neo-Orientalist frameworks that have been touched upon earlier? that have been constructed by Western media and academia. So what you first need to do is understand the limitations of the most commonly employed frameworks and treatments that are used to describe these kinds of violence and discrimination. So the first being, Iran-Saudi rivalry, which I categorize under geopolitical tensions. So often people say that, the lives lost, predominantly and disproportionately Shia lives, are just collateral damage in an attempt to, for these powers to accumulate power within these regions. This fails to explain anti-Shiism, both in predominantly Shia areas and states, and also doesn't really account for the fact that anti-Shia violence has very deep historical roots and has been taking place since before the establishment of either of these countries. The second being, ideological alignment of armed groups and the weaponization of religious identity. And I think this is one that actually comes up a lot more often in interpersonal exchanges. So either Sunni or Shia, will bring up the actions of a specific armed group, and they'll describe it as if, these armed groups they're made up of totally uniform actors who are motivated all by the same thing. But, in reality, we know this to not be true. We know, groups like, the PMF in Iraq or Ansarullah in Yemen also include Sunni members as well. And finally, the primordial hatred between the Sunni and the Shia, which is called sectarian conflict. So I personally don't like using the term sect because it has very colonialist undertones and implications, which honestly could be its own kind of conversation. But really briefly, the term sect itself refers to the offshoot of a mainstream religion that is itself considered orthodox, and the sect being unorthodox and deviant, and by extension, in the case of the Shia Muslims, expendable, their lives. But in introducing Shiism as a sect, it further contributes to the idea of those who follow it are misguided. Back to this framework of primary hatred that is honestly used in academia way more than many of us would even probably imagine, is basically it says these two groups have always hated each other. This is the way it has been. This is the way it always will be. And we know this to not be true because we look at history and we see that there are many instances where they've existed not necessarily always in conflict, but in conversation with one another, polemically or otherwise. And the main problems with these frameworks, they fail to consider a number of things, including the ones I've already listed, but also fail to recognize the asymmetric nature of the violence. The word conflict itself, insinuates that both groups are suffering equally, whereas on a transnational scale, we know that's not the case. So understanding it for what it is, with all of its nuances, regardless of how much that complicates our understanding, is crucial, because being reductionist only further perpetuates cycles of violence because blame is assigned equally to both sides. While the Shia faces systemic marginalization and violence, you need to look at it within every specific national context to understand how it can also be rooted in indigenous local grievances before you just chalk it up in these elaborate explanations of international relations and regional dynamics. And just briefly on the area within this topic that I'm personally researching is the emergence of this movement led by Shia indigenous activists and diaspora to reframe this kind of violence as genocide. So while I found in my interviews of different stakeholder groups, including activists, religious leaders, academics, and average Shia people from or currently living in these countries, is the optimism of a humanitarian lens, looking at the suffering of the Shia, yielding more results in reducing this kind of violence than a sectarian one. So in the study, I begin by identifying the definition of genocide as it's outlined in the Genocide Convention of 1948, which I've listed here on the screen. And while it seems pretty straightforward, there's this wrench that's thrown into it that has been a huge obstacle for other diaspora groups who are also trying to reframe violence as genocide. In order for it to be considered genocide, there needs to be evidence of intent. So the question arises then, how do you prove this kind of premeditation? And while it's unfortunate, that's one issue that the Shia do not have to worry about at all. There is plenty of clear evidence in the form of videos, print media, and official statements by both non-state and state actors who, make it clear that, that genocidal intent is kind of their goal. Whether it's in a 56-page issue of Dabiq, which is ISIS's magazine that highlights the rewards of killing the Shia and their goal to eradicate them, to a Saudi cleric who serves in the Ministry of Education, saying that Shias are rats and vermin. The patterns of violence expressed in these declarations of intent, the patterns of violence experienced by the Shia matches these declarations of intent. So one of the key findings that I found after speaking to many of these other Shias in these different countries where anti-Shiism is highly underreported on is that it's the absence of a consensus among these stakeholders and not the absence of violence that is the main obstacle in the way of this narrative being empowered and gaining traction. And to conclude, here is a quote from one of the interviews I conducted that stuck with me ever since, along with some further resources for research. Emily Hawley's article here, she did a wonderful article kind of founding and grounding this argument for Shia genocide to an international humanitarian legal framework. And I've listed the article here, and there are multiple different resources. And so there's multiple different resources that Shia Rights Watch can provide, and also databases, and Pew Research Center is also always a great resource as well. So I hope I didn't take up too much time, but I hope, inshallah, that this presentation was helpful in creating a foundation for our future discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sister Medina. That was so useful to put into frame the language that we use and the system that we're using so that we understand how to put our discussion and the context. Thank you. We needed that for the discussion, and inshallah it is helpful. And finally, to our final speaker before we begin the discussion, to give us some remarks, Syed Saleh. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for again your attendance today. Please let us know what your perspective is on the issue of Shia genocide and Baqi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Thank you very much for inviting me, and Assalamu alaikum to all of the respected panelists, to the guests, especially Sayyid Abazar and all of the others, Sister Medina, Brother Abbas, and Sister Fidda, and to all of you watching. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. The destruction of the Baqi cemetery, which took place in either 1925 or 1926, is one of the it's a great testament of an example of the anti-Shia and anti-Ahlul Bayt prejudice that has been going on for hundreds of years. Ever since the beginning of the religion of Islam, there has been a group of people who have directed their hatred against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam when they can, and when they are unable to direct it, when they're unable to show it directly to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, what they do is they take it out on the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells his followers, he tells them, those people who are accusing you and hating you and murdering you and killing you, in fact, they have a problem with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Their problem is not with the Shia, but with those who the Shias are following. And the event of the destruction of the Baqi is a testament of the anti-Shia sentiment, because it's ongoing until today, and the whole world is silent. The whole world is quiet. It's been over close to 100 years since the destruction of the Baqi. And this is not just one incident that has happened in history. In 1805, as the other speakers mentioned, there was the attack, the plunder of Karbala, where thousands of people were killed and many items were stolen from the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. A few years ago in 2006, I believe that they blew up the shrine of Samarra. Many times the shrine of Imam al-Hussein has been, attacked and destroyed. So this is something that's ongoing. This is something that has been going on for a very long time. And in fact, even during the time of Saddam, they shelled the dome of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in the Intifada, the 1991 Intifada. They attacked the shrine of Imam al-Hussein. And even until today, if you go to Karbala, you see that there are bullet signs and marks on the marble inside the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So this desecration is something that is ongoing. And here, I don't want to repeat what others have repeated. What is our role? What is our job? Our job is to raise awareness. We need to raise awareness and let the whole world know that the Shias have been the victims of genocide, that the Shias have been the victim of, prejudice and hate, and they're all Shias have always been the victims. Read history since the time of Sheikh al-Tusi. Sheikh al-Tusi was in Baghdad. They came and they sacked Baghdad and they burned his library, and he had to leave Baghdad. He had to go and set up the Hawza in Najaf. Why was the Hawza set up in Najaf 1,000 years ago? It was set up by Sheikh al-Tusi because his library and everything that he had was attacked and it was burned. So this is something that is ongoing. We need to let the world know. We need to speak out. The same way today, probably, I don't know in the UK, but in the United States, kids in elementary school, middle school, wherever, at whatever level you are, you learn about the Holocaust. They're in every book, in every story, you're being taught about that. We need to raise awareness as well. We need to raise awareness, let people know that the Shias have been victims, and that is one of the ways that we are able to protect our own rights. And we need to, another very important point, just raising awareness is one, but second, we should not have blind activism. We need to have ma'rifah. We need to have faith. We need to have a foundation when we come and call upon people to preserve and protect the rights of the Shias and the followers of the Ahl Bayt and anyone who's oppressed for that matter. So we need to learn from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. When we look at the lives of the Imams, we see that many times the Imams of the Ahl Bayt, they did not speak out except if they saw that they had a solid foundation to rely upon. Because just yelling and shouting and causing commotion does not bring anything. We have seen that for decades and hundreds of years, people have just been making noise, but it hasn't done anything. We need to bring real change. And this is where the movement of Imam al-Mahdi comes into place. This is where we need to have a strong and solid foundation. You see, out of all of the Imams, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, his movement was a successful movement. Even though everyone that was with Imam al-Hussein was killed, however, his movement impacts people until today. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, he had people, but they let him down. Imam al-Hasan had people, they betrayed him. The other Imams, they had people who would come out and they tell them, you know what, let's defend the Shia, let's stop, let's make a movement, let's do something. But the Imams alayhim salam, they would not do anything, because you need to have a strong foundation in order to bring a big movement, a movement that is defending the rights of the oppressed and defending people. So, for example, a man comes and visits Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam all the way from Khurasan. Imam Sadiq is in Medina. A man comes from Khurasan. He comes to visit the Imam. He tells him, you have 100,000 men that are willing to fight for you. 100,000 men that are willing to, anytime, any moment you say anything, they're ready to fight for you. The Imam alayhi salam, he tells this man, please sit. The man keeps insisting. He tells the Imam, why aren't you doing a movement? Let's do something. Let's bring change. The Imam tells him, wait. Then a while later, one of the companions of Imam Sadiq by the name of Harun al-Makki, he enters. The Imam alayhi salam, he tells him, oh Harun, before you sit, I want you to go and sit in the tanur. The tanur is the fire pit, the oven that they used to make bread in. He tells him, go and sit in the fire pit. Harun al-Makki, he has his sandals in his hands. He goes and he sits in the fire pit, and then the Imam alayhi salam begins to ask him some questions. All while the Khurasani is watching, the man from Khurasan is watching. So a while later, he tells him, come out, oh Harun, come out. Harun comes out, then that Khurasani, he goes and he sees Harun, nothing has happened to him. Then the Imam alayhi salam, he tells the Khurasani, he tells him, when you have men like this man, then come and call us and tell us to come and make a movement. Come and ask for us to stand up against the injustice. This, my dear brothers and sisters, this story, is very relatable to our times right now. Right now, we want to see the end of oppression. We want to see the end of anti-Shia hatred. But we are the ones who are oppressing. We are the ones who have anti-Shia sentiments within our own communities, within our own selves, within our own, within our own mosques. Sometimes we see this. So we need to cleanse our hearts. We need to have a solid foundation. We need to purify ourselves from sins. We need to purify ourselves from haram. We need to purify ourselves from anything that brings us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because whatever brings us away from Allah, that will bring us away from the Imam of our time. And this whole institution, Imam al-Mahdi awareness, everything in our life, whatever is going on, has to be connected with Imam al-Mahdi. Everything, whether it's Baqi, whether it's anti-Shia hatred, prejudice, the Hazara, anything that's going on, Palestine, all of that, it's all, we have to be connected. We have to connect everything. The final solution is Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. If we think otherwise, then we are becoming an obstacle to the movement of Imam al-Mahdi. Yes, this doesn't mean that we have to remain quiet, that we shouldn't do anything until the Imam comes. No, because we have a duty to prepare ourselves and set the foundation for the Imam and make sure that we are ready to be loyal and sincere followers of the Imam. But our real goal, our real ultimate solution is the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. So this means that we have to strengthen our ma'rifah, we have to strengthen our faith, so that we are able to defend ourselves. Today, a lot of the mu'mineen, a lot of the believers, they want to see change, but they don't know how, because they themselves, they have a weakness, and they themselves, they are unable to bring that real change. So with that, I will end, and we will put it back to you. But my main point is that if we want to see change, we have to be that change that we want to see. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change the matters of a group of people unless they change themselves, unless they bring the real change. And we are able to. Today, the Shias, we're not a minority. We're not a group of nobodies that's just existing there. No, the Shias are very strong. The Shias in Iraq, when ISIS attacked, when the US army, when the Iraqi army, when other countries, they were not able to defeat ISIS, it was the Shias that defeated ISIS. And this is the same that happens in Lebanon, in south of Lebanon, when one of the strongest armies in the Middle East, Israel, they took over the South Lebanon. It was a group of Shias that were able to kick them out and take back their borders. And the same will happen in Afghanistan. The same happens in Iran. The same happens in Pakistan. We have to stand strong. We have to have that firm foundation, and we will be able to bring real change. But our ultimate goal that we're looking for is being a part of the movement of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. Yes, brother.
Ahsantum Sayyidina, thank you so much for concluding our opening remarks, and also for giving us some direction for what we are aiming towards. So inshallah, we hope that even this discussion gives us actions for the dhuhr of our Imam, inshallah. There are a few questions that have been coming in, but I'll start with one of my own. And if any of you would like to ask each other, please feel free. But something which all of us mentioned was the idea that Baqi and 8th of Shawwal is a symbol of something more. Because if we look at it as an isolated event, we lose the intention of the enemy against the Shia. One point I heard was that they could not attack Ahlul Bayt, so they attacked their Shia in history. And similarly today, in Baqi, they cannot remove the memory of the Imams from our hearts. As said about this, says we carry that haram with us, but they can at least stop us from attending the grave. The question I'd like to ask all of you is, what is the plan of those who hate the Shia in Baqi? What do they want by restricting access from us to visit our Imams, by calling us a sect instead of being part of the madhab, by taking these strategies? What is their eventual plan for us? And Syed Abazar, because you're the one who mentioned this very beautiful point about we carry it with us internally, I would like to ask if you can begin. What do they wish will happen to us by destroying Baqi and allowing us to tolerate it?
Thank you. It's a very beautiful question. And thank you, Sayyidina, with all those beautiful comments, and alhamdulillah. So obviously first of all, we have to, when we go to Quran, we find so many signs of muttaqeen and mu'mineen. Also, we find so many signs of the kuffar and munafiqeen. We have a short surah which calls kafirun, but we have a longer surah, munafiqeen. And the first thing that we have to be aware of, knowing our enemies. This is very, very important, brothers and sisters. If we don't have any knowledge about our enemies, if we don't know them, how can we know about their next moves, right? About their intention, how deeply they they have the animosity against us. When you talk to the Wahhabis, I'm not talking about the takfiris, like the Wahhabis. They say, oh, we don't have any problem with Ahlul Bayt. You guys do ghulu, you do exaggerate, you worship Ahlul Bayt, you have different Quran. You have actually 3 Qurans, Mus'haf Fatima, and then and Quran, and also Mus'haf, let's say Alawi, right? You have 3 Qurans. Or your Quran has 40 juz. The other people say 60 juz. These are the things that I've heard personally from those, right? So now, when we go to the people, they say, oh, we don't have any problem with Ahlul Bayt. We have problem with the way you guys think. And when we ask, okay, what do you think about my belief towards Ahlul Bayt? And then you find out, subhanallah, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab says in his book, At-Tawheed, he says the shirk of Shias are worse than the shirk of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab. Look at this. The shirk of Shias is worse than the shirk of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab. These 2 were the main enemies and the worst enemies of the Holy Prophet. That means, oh, Shias are the enemies of Prophet and they're the enemies of Quran. They're carrying the name of Islam and all that, but they're dangerous. The ideas that they're spreading, this is the way that they think about us. When you go to Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Nabawi, can you carry Mafatih al-Janan or Nahj al-Balagha or Sahif al-Sajidiyah? No way. They will take you away, right? So it's a huge censorship against Shias and Ahlul Bayt and all that. So the first thing that we have to take it very serious is to know our enemies. We have to know what Wahhabis believe, how they think, and how they plan out. This is one thing. And 2, we have to, as Syed said, we have to raise this awareness, but first amongst ourselves. Unfortunately, there are so many people, especially those who live in the West, so many of us, unfortunately, because we have safety, because we have security, because we don't have financial problems, because we're not starving out of poverty and hunger. Say, okay, oh, Ya Allah, may Allah, give, ease all these problems to, our brothers and sisters in Iraq, Syria, or anywhere, right? But why don't we put ourselves in their shoes? We have to look at our brothers and sisters in Yemen. Look at our Shia brothers and sisters in Ahsa and Qatif. In Shias are in Medina, right? In this Medina to Nabi. In Afghanistan, Kashmir. I forgot about, I apologize. There is a sister talking about the, Kashmir. Yes, Kashmir. We have to put ourselves in their position. And then we find out, oh, subhanallah, look, just imagine that, like my parents and my siblings live in Afghanistan. Every single day, at night, I can't sleep. I have to make sure they're safe. Days, nights, I have to make sure they're safe, right? They're not being attacked by Taliban or all these, terrorist groups. So this is one thing. We have to know our enemies. We have to start changing with putting ourselves in their shoes, in their position. And then 3, gaining more ma'rifah towards Ahlul Bayt. I can't, unfortunately, we don't have enough ma'rifah towards Ahlul Bayt. We barely read Nahjul Balagha. Honestly, you ask yourself, whoever is watching this live or inshallah in the future, how many times, how many times a day, a year, you open Nahjul Balagha and try to learn something from from Amirul Mu'mineen? How many times? How many times we take all these serious? These are the lessons of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. As much as we know about Ahlul Bayt, we will be more smart. We will be smarter in basically the way we approach, the way we basically spread the message of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Syed, for that point. On the final point about we need to gain ma'rifah ourselves, Syed Saleh, I'd like to put this question to you, and I know you're leaving soon, so we'll take as much of time that we can get from you. How should the Shi'i react to these examples of suffering? One example Syed mentioned, you improve your relationship to Ahlul Bayt. But more than that, if we want to have this informed activism, when a person looks at Baqi and all these destructions happening, what effect should it have in us? What change should happen to us if we do it properly? Syed, you're muted at the moment.
Whenever we see that there's a suffering going on, this is something that unites the Shias. You know, just a few days ago, I saw that there was, so many people from all over the world, Muslims and even non-Muslims, are united over the Palestinian issue. This was a dead issue, but then once it started happening, they got together and they started speaking out, and these protests and all of this activism did bring change. We saw the change. Yesterday, the New York Times, they posted, on their front cover, probably one of the most important newspapers in America, the images of 64 children that were killed. And this is a big blow to Israel and the Zionist movement, where a major newspaper is showing pictures of a bunch of kids that are killed. And this happened because of the activism that has been going on. So when we see that there is an aggression against the Shia, this should be something that unites the Shia. But it's very unfortunate that we see that the issue of Baqi has been a dead issue. It has been a forgotten issue. Every year we try to revive it. Every year we try to raise awareness. And some people, first they say it's only a Shia issue. Within the Shia, some they say, oh, this is only one group of Shia that are speaking about this. Another group of Shia, their issues are different issues. No, we need to see the importance of these issues, raise awareness about them, and be united to be able to bring change. If we are united, if there's enough pressure in the world, the politics is everything in the world, it's run by pressure. Here in the United States, lobbies control the United States politics. This is why some movements, they have a stronger say, other movements, they don't have a stronger say. When we are all united, when we all speak out together and we lobby governments, we lobby politicians, and we put pressure on them to, bring awareness to this issue, then it will happen. What? Saudi Arabia, they give money to stay in power. When Trump first came to power, they gave him $500 billion just so that he could protect them and be silent for them. So for them, it just requires a little bit of pressure, especially for those living in the West, living in the United States, living in Canada, living in Britain and other countries. The leaders of the countries in the Middle East, most of them, they're slaves of the politicians here. So it just requires a little bit of action, a little bit of activism, and that will be able to bring change.
This point you mentioned about 8th of Shawwal comes, we have these programs, and then people have this reactionary approach that, I'm very angry about Baqi, and then they don't mention it again for the rest of the year. Clearly, this is a very dysfunctional way of making progress. What should go in between? Can you think of any steps that can help practically chart out how we use this energy and this emotion towards something more practical, not just for ourselves, but for our community, so that from 8th of Shawwal to the next 8th of Shawwal, we can show that we have made some difference? Can you think of anything which we should start on or prioritize?
One thing I've noticed is that many of us were reactionary, as we've mentioned. In Muharram, we come out, we bring the black, we act as if we know, we cry, we shed tears, and then the second Muharram ends, we go back to our life. Ramadan comes, we read Quran, we do whatever we're supposed to do, and then as soon as Ramadan finishes, we go back to our lives. We're not allowing these major events in the Islamic calendar to bring change, to allow change to happen in our lives. We need to see real change. We need to see more Muslim youth writing articles, more Muslim youth becoming journalists. A lot of the Middle Easterners and the Muslims who have migrated, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and these places, they want their children to be doctors and lawyers. That's all that they focus on. Doctors and lawyers are very good, but we need to have people who are activists, who speak out, who are journalists, who like Sister Medina, for example, who do studies on these issues, and they come and they provide that study in front of a top university. And this is how change happens. This is how change happens. You have to speak out for your rights. So this is something that I see that we all need to do. We need to allow the Muharram, Fatimiyya, this 8th of Shawwal, the gatherings that we have. We need to allow these to don't just have these be programs that we go and we attend and then we go back home and our lives are back to normal. No, let me go back home after this program and bring change, either writing a book, speaking out, doing something that will bring real change, so that the next year I will see that I have done something. I have become productive.
Ahsantum. Syed, I know you've got to go. Have you got time for one question that's just come in now before you leave, inshallah?
One more, yes. I'm sorry, if you want the others.
Agha, we will use you while we have you, inshallah, and then we will continue the discussion after. Question was on the 12th Imam. So it was something which we have all touched on, because obviously this campaign is the Imam Mahdi Awareness Campaign. It was, how do we use Baqi in our conversations about the Imam? Now, there's definitely a wrong way of doing it, which is we shouldn't do anything because Imam will come and change everything, because that forces us into apathy. There's a good way of doing it, which gives us inspiration for action. I will ask everyone this, but first, if you said, Saleh, when you speak about the 12th Imam to people, do you mention Baqi? And if you do, in what language do you phrase it in terms of his dhuhur and his return and his mission? What is its role in that process?
So we believe that Imam al-Mahdi is going to come at a time after the earth has been filled with oppression. يَمْلَأُهَا قِسْطًا وَعَدْلًا بَعْدَ أَنْ مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا. After the earth has been filled with oppression and tyranny. And one of the greatest examples of oppression and tyranny is the very family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muslim heritage. The family of the Prophet, their graves are desecrated. Their graves, no one is allowed to visit them. No one is allowed to go and speak, do ziyarah, and you're called a mushrik, you're called a kafir by just daring and having the audacity to show love to the Prophet or the family of the Prophet. Isn't this oppression? Isn't this tyranny? So this is one of the examples of the tyranny against Islam and the world, and against the Prophet that's going on right now. And the Imam, he's going to come and change that. The Imam's going to come and change that. However, the Imam alayhi salam, we have a duty towards the Imam. من أفضل أعمال أمتي انتظار الفرج. From the best deeds of my ummah is to wait for the faraj. This is a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. We have to wait for the faraj. Now, some people, they have the idea that I'm going to be passively waiting. I'm just going to wait. Whenever the Imam comes, then we'll join the movement of the Imam. But I'm afraid that this is a failed approach, and this type of waiting is not what the Imams want. The Imams want active waiting. Being active while waiting, meaning preparing and setting the foundation for the Imam. So that means even if I'm not able to rebuild the Baqi' right now, but I have to speak out. I have to have my heart be in line with the Imam. And this is something that we all need to do. And we have to do dua. One of the best things that we could do is, if we are not able to bring real change, we have to do dua, and that will be something, inshallah, will be answered.
Inshallah, thank you, Syed. Stay for long, but if you have to leave, then thank you again.
Thank you very much, everyone. May Allah bless you all. Syed Abazar, Brother Abbas, Sister Medina, and everyone who's watching. Thank you very much, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Wassalamu alaikum.
Sayyidina. Assalamu alaikum.
Sayyidina, thank you. One phrase which Said mentioned, I want to ask you about Sister Medina, which was about making real change, not just change. And what this would mean is there's some impact to all of the work that we're doing, whether it's writing articles or speaking out. We should see some progress. But in your presentation, we showed that there are many systemic problems which are in the way. It's not so simple as we just speak out and something gets done. We are facing a system. When you are speaking out and publishing and writing and speaking on this issue, do you face an obstacle from the system in terms of Shia genocide or Shia phobia? And what prevents us from getting things done? What prevents us from making words into actions?
That's a great question. I think more oftentimes than not, it's ourselves. We get in our own way, right? We create the obstacles. We're the ones who, create these kind of barriers. We come up with our own excuses as to why we can't do something, why we can't manifest this actual tangible change. Like Syed Saleh had mentioned, it's all about creating pressure. And I think there are many different ways, regardless of, whether you're a student, a parent, whether you're working, whatever your situation is, whatever your own personal circumstances are, you have your own methods at your disposal in order for you to, if not raise awareness, if not, living here in the West, voting for as close as possible, right? Participating in these kinds of systems where we can either create change from within, or there are also alternative methods where you can spread awareness and target specific communities that are influential in changing the rhetoric about the matters that are most important and that pertain to you. So it's not just showing up and protesting outside of the embassy for Jannat Baqi once a year. That's if you're just having that annual commemoration, that is something separate and not going to yield the results we're looking for. If we want a permanent change, we need to have a consistent effort striving towards that permanent change. So I think, my own experience conducting research and shedding light, I don't think I've personally faced as many obstacles or barriers because this is something that is so relatively new to so many people. We're still coming into the very onset of the digital age. Information is becoming so much more available to people who previously never had access to it. And I think what I'm about to say is totally a reflection of the work itself and not of myself, in total humility. I was recently awarded a grant to support this research and push it through to publication. That was a big deal to me because I had never heard of, any Shia studies, any research specifically looking at the plight of the Shia being awarded, some kind of monetary grant to support it. Also, I recently presented it at the Stanford Research Conference, and this research, my presentation, won Best Poster. So the project can gain traction. People are interested in it. People, have not heard of it before. I think we just need, that this new generation of, motivated researchers to, be aware that there is in fact a path for them to do this kind of work if it's if it's something that is interesting in them, and if they are passionate about creating a sustained change. So the interest is there, but we just kind of need to find people to fill it. I would love to have someone to talk about research with, and there's so many different things that I want to talk about, I want to address in papers and such, but it's not just about the one, it's about the many, it's about the community and fostering that community of intellectual exchange. And, not just having that exchange, but seeing that change manifest in actual tangible, growth.
Exactly. Everyone kind of has a part to play in this, but when one of us does as well as you're doing, we have to congratulate you and wish the best, inshallah, and afia for these projects and others as well. But like you said, everyone's got a role to play and everyone can kind of make a stand. And it might be in universities, it might be at work, it could be anywhere. Syed, when you think about how all of us can make an impact, we can all make some sort of stand, we can all do something. I remember that when you were speaking, you spoke a lot about Saudi Arabia being this hub, being this problem. And it's important that we speak out about these issues. And it's important that we highlight where is the problem coming from. And from what you were saying, it made it very clear to me of where the issue is and why we're feeling it. How can we make a stand against Saudi Arabia? How can we call out when these things happen? if it's our responsibility, what's the most impactful way of doing it?
It's a beautiful question. By the way, Sister Medina mentioned beautiful points. Yeah, we need to, study more and research more on papers and books and all that. And I took some notes too. Thank you. I don't know if it's good to say it here or not. Inshallah, it's good. I know the main weakness of Saudi Arabia government, and that is media. And that is our superpower. You know why? Because if you notice, most of the medias, they don't care about Shia, Sunnis, and all that, but they're against Saudi Arabia government, right? They're against. Forget about the politics, the other top part of the politics, Shia, Sunni, like no, just the media. One of the things that we are lacking, and unfortunately we have so many evidence to make a huge change against the Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, is media. Like, for example, about the Baqi, how many good and professional documentaries we have? How many? How many feature films, short films, feature films we have about all these genocides that these people created and all these crimes that they committed in about, like Sheikh Namr. Show me one good documentary about in Afghanistan. There are millions of untold stories. There are people I've met that they're being tortured by Taliban, and Taliban did, like, committed major sins in front of them. The people that they're talking about Quran, about Tawheed, Taliban, and they were. I feel ashamed to mention those sins. They were doing it right in front of them. What the ISIS did, the jihad and nikah, right? And all these genocides, all these crimes, how much we have. There was a documentary in Netflix I was watching. It was like 2 years ago, I guess. It was One Day Fight Against ISIS. There was an American, documentary director went there, and he was actually there, and he was filming while they were fighting. He mentioned a beautiful point. Can you imagine a non-Muslim, an American film director? He said, I learned here that this fight will take at least 10 more years, because they're not fighting people. They're fighting they're fighting an ideology, right? So how much film do we have about these? Almost none. Saudi Arabia, the government, the Wahhabism have so much flaws. There's so much wrong with these people, with their beliefs. And there's so much topics that we can make films about these. We can create documentaries about these. The media should be filled with all these. And believe me, that will damage. That will create remember what happened to Khashoggi, right? What happened to Khashoggi? It was almost, if it was not because of Trump, the whole relationship between America and the government of Saudi Arabia would be destroyed. Because of that. Because of what? It was media. That was media. And the media was about to defeat the whole government of Saudi Arabia, which made the government of Saudi Arabia very weak. very weak. Still, they're under so much pressure. It was only one victim. You know, many Khashoggis, people like Khashoggis are getting killed every single day. Not like him. Innocent people like kids, women, children, babies. People are not aware of these. They don't know. Why they don't know? It's our fault. It's our fault. We're just waiting for CNN and Fox News and all these Hollywood and come and solve our problems. They okay, you know what? Come and show people. No, I have my own social media. I have my Facebook. I have my Instagram. I have my Twitter. There's so many tons of Muslim filmmakers in America. What did we do? How many YouTubers we have? We have thousands of YouTubers, and they have the ability of that. What do? We just complain. Oh, when Arba'in walk, why these social media don't cover? Okay, what do you do? Right? Why do you complain? Okay, they don't do it. They're not gonna do it. Did you do your part? Did I do my part? I just go on the member and say, okay, people do this. No, did I do something? Or am I doing something? You are doing something? In my opinion, one of the most important weapons that we have is media. We have to take advantage of it. We have all these. In China, you're not allowed to have Facebook. Those poor Muslims are being tortured for many years. No Google, no YouTube, no Facebook, no Instagram, nothing. Here we have all these. Why are we being silent? Why don't we use this? Go to Netflix. How many Muslims, Islamic films you see? Oh, don't. This is the theory of what was that? We call it theory tota in Farsi. I forgot the name of it. Conspiracy theory, right? Oh, Netflix. Oh, they're not gonna. No, you pay them. You make the film with a good quality. You pay them. They will put it there, right? The problem of our Shia community is this, brothers and sisters. We complain and we don't do nothing. And we have the media. We have to use the media. We have to use all these platforms. And believe me, we can make a huge change. Can you imagine if we had 100,000 Facebook page, 100,000 Instagram page, 100,000 Twitter? Just focus on all these. And we had millions of short films, documentaries, feature films, YouTube and everywhere. We will see the change. Because these days, people are attached to these social medias, all the platforms. So I think that's one of the main things that we can make a huge impact, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah, Syed. Definitely social media now, we are in a much better position than we were maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Everyone has an account, but so much work has been done to promote our work in general online. It just requires strategy and coordination. We have the platform. I remember in London when we were trying to promote the Arba'in, because you mentioned the Arba'in march that was happening and Arba'in. We went to many news publications. We mentioned this. We said to them, look at what's happening in Iraq. Look at the numbers. Please publish it. And we found that many of the journalists themselves didn't know about it in the first place in order to take a stance on it. They just hadn't heard of it. And if they maybe had heard of Imam Hussein or heard of Ashura, they would have a context in which to make a decision. But it's very difficult to do two things at once: introduce a new concept and help phrase the narrative. And like you mentioned, if we have a more general understanding of these issues, it will help us to make more of an impact. We do have to close soon, but I want to ask Sister Medina a question and then we'll come back to you, Syed, for final words. Sister, when you're speaking about Shia genocide to people, do you find that you have the chance to shape the narrative how you want and just describe it as it is? Or do they already have certain views or certain paradigms in which they're thinking of, and you have to convince them to look at things differently? How free are we to decide how this narrative goes?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think, if you're talking to Muslims who already kind of have like their own preconceived notion, whether they consider themselves political or apolitical, whether they consider, the proper role of Muslims to be, quietist, to focus more on ibadah, and just as if that by itself, as if worship itself isn't inherently activist, but that's a separate discussion. But I think it really just depends on who you're talking to. I think you have more freedom and flexibility if you're talking to non-Muslims who are not as aware of the kind of, I don't want to say internal strife, because the violence experienced by the Shia has such resounding implications, and has a strong impact on everyone in the world, regardless of your religious affiliation, right? So I don't think it just not just the Shia are affected by the violence that just, like it was mentioned earlier. These terrorist groups do not just target the Shia; they target anyone who doesn't agree with them. Period. So, based on what that perception is, on who it is that you're talking to, I've actually noticed that sometimes it might be more difficult to speak to Muslims about Shia genocide, because it's hard to kind of swallow that pill that that Saudi Arabia, the land that's the custodian, has the custodianship of the two holy cities, is capable of being such being like kind of like the epicenter for cultivating this toxic ideology, right? And that's why I think it because there's this reluctance, people don't want to acknowledge that, that it's oftentimes more easier to focus on issues like Israel and Palestine, where it's like a non-Muslim aggressor, and you have that binary there that's kind of much more easier to distinguish. Whereas within Islam, you kind of don't want to acknowledge the reality that it might be groups that you might otherwise listen to their speeches for, or to like learn from. You wouldn't want to acknowledge the role that the role they play in facilitating and perpetuating these narratives that justify violence. So I think within the Muslim community, it might be a bit more difficult. But with non-Muslims, like you had mentioned earlier, so many just don't know. And it's as simple as that. And exactly what the Syed had mentioned, what Syed Abazar had mentioned earlier, it's our responsibility then, everyone, because if all of us had the mentality like, okay, it's okay, I won't do anything, because then someone else more skilled with more resources will do it, then no one would do anything. That's why each of us individually have to take this and shoulder this burden of responsibility onto ourselves, and be active in whatever way we can, whatever capacity we have, to kind of interact. I know I kind of like strayed from your question a little bit, but yeah, I think the flexibility really does depend on what the context that you're in, whether in a university setting. A lot of Shia students have kind of created their own spaces when they don't feel welcomed, like creating APSOCs and ABSAs. Shia centers. I have seen an uptick in collaboration for interfaith, dialogue that is kind of getting at these more uncomfortable conversations. And maybe because of those, that's creating and facilitating more flexibility in, reshaping and changing people's preconceived narratives about Shia genocide within the Muslim community. But generally, that's what my experience has been.
Thank you. That is very valuable to hear, so that we know what it's like on that side of the discourse. So thank you. We must close the discussion, but I want to ask a last question to you, Syed. Maybe this is me, because I would just want to keep this going for longer, but we do have to close, and then Sister Fidda will finish the program. Syed, one really productive idea which we're having is we have to do this. This is not an option for us. It's an obligation that we have to achieve success in representing the oppression that has happened and in working for solutions. And I think one thing which prevents us is not realizing how important this is for us personally. Baqi is not separate to me. You are actually a good example of this, because you come from one of the countries in which we are seeing oppression, and yet you are also teaching other people in different communities about Islam more generally. So you are an example of this point. But how do we make people realize that this is about you? It's not about something separate. It's not about the future. It's not about something that cannot be done. This is your interest. And how do we encourage this activism where people think that if I don't do this, I lose. I miss out on on my own worship? How do we have that discussion?
You're talking about to Muslims or to
I think to
anyone?
Shia, because most people listening are followers of Ahlul Bayt, and that should be a reason to take this personally. How do we do that?
So just imagine yourself in I'm a very visual person, so just imagine you're in the day of Ashura, 61st of Hijri. You are in the side of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, but you're not able to do anything. You're not one of those 72. You're just there, but you don't have any ability. You're just a witness, nothing and nobody but a witness. How would you feel? There's a I don't remember the name of it, like a 3D. It's kind of like a glass, and you put it, and then you feel like you're really into it. They made it for Karbala too. There's a device. So, and then I've seen people wearing it, and in that 3D, it shows where Shimr is, what he does to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. People cry and walk and try to run, and because they want to stop Shimr to do what he did to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, right? The thing is, we need to see ourselves in that position. We need to see. The thing is, these people, I think Syed Qazwini mentioned this beautiful point, that because they can't fight with Ahlul Bayt, right? What they do, they kill Shias. Also, they destroy the grave of Ahlul Bayt, the harams of Ahlul Bayt. If Ahlul Bayt were there, they would kill Ahlul Bayt. They would fight against Ahlul Bayt. What happened 2 years ago, I went to Umrah in the month of Rajab. So I was wearing, thawb or dishtasha, not wearing amama, so nobody could tell that I'm Shia. And I saw a Wahhabi who was explaining the Baqi to a bunch of Hajis from Indonesia and Malaysia, right? And he mentioned all the Sahaba of the Holy Prophet, except Imam al-Hasan. Okay, forget about Imam Sajjad, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq, right? But Imam Hasan, at least he was one of the Sahaba and companions of Prophet. At least he could say, okay, there is the grave of Hassan, which was the grandson of Prophet and one of the companions of Prophet. He didn't mention that. And I said, excuse me, in a very polite way, in a respectful way, excuse me, you forgot one of the Sahabas. He said, who is that? I said, Hassan. As soon as I mentioned Imam al-Hasan's name, he started yelling at me and accusing me that I'm a kafir, I'm a mushrik, and I'm a Shia. Imagine that, right? So we have to take it personally, because when I mentioned Imam Hassan's name, he said, you're Shia. You're Shia. We have to remember, because they don't have access to Imam al-Hassan, Imam Sajjad, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq, they destroy the grave of Ahlul Bayt. Otherwise, they would destroy, they would kill, they would fight with Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. They publish books about the Fada'il Yazid in Saudi Arabia. There's a book, The Virtues of Yazid. 17 times Ibn Taymiyyah in his book, 17 times he insulted Imam Ali alayhi salam in Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha. Isn't it personal? So what is, if we don't take this personal, so what is personal for us? In the day of Ashura, no one dares to wear something happy, right? No one dares to like laugh and make jokes and joke around. No, we're gonna stop it. Excuse me, what are you doing? Today is Ashura. Why? Because it is personal for us. It is personal. But how much we take this personal, why don't we take the genocide, let's say the takhrib or the demolition of the qubur of Ahlul Bayt, the grave of Ahlul Bayt in Medina, as personal as we take the Ashura? Because we know more about Ashura. We take it more serious. We barely know Ahlul Bayt. Come on, let's admit it. How much information do we have about Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam? How much? How much do we know about Imam Hassan al-Askari? How much do we know about Imam Muhammad al-Baqir? This is the thing. The main way and the only way that we can take these more personal, then in order to basically to proceed towards the being more serious about this and put more pressure on, work harder, is to gain knowledge towards Ahlul Bayt. Ma'rifah. And again, I repeat this many times, media. We have to take it very serious. We have to, I don't know if filmmakers are watching this or they will watch this in the future. Please take this serious. And you'll have millions of you. You're going to have that. You're going to have the support. Inshallah. There is a recent film that Yasser al-Habib was making about Fatima al-Zahra, the Lady of Heaven, right? So many people started, disagreeing with it. I disagree with it for sure, 100%. But the thing is, why do we complain? Why don't I do something? I don't know media, probably. I don't know films. There's so many other people know, right? We don't take, as long as we don't take media serious, we can't really make a huge impact, because this is the era of information. And Wahhabis are lacking in this because they're against it. The whole world support media and films industry and all that. They are against it. So we can take advantage of it, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah, Syed, thank you for that practical advice that everyone with an account can easily replicate by just forwarding messages or by promoting the cause. And thank you to Sister Medina and to Syed Saleh, wherever he is, inshallah, afiyah for him. And to the listeners for taking part in this discussion, for your comments. We now end the discussion, and I pass to Sister Fidda to just end the program on behalf of the Imam Mahdi Awareness Campaign.
Thank you, Brother Abbas, and thank you to all our panelists, mashallah. I'm speechless as to the beautiful discussion that we've just had and how much I've learned in terms of thinking about the direction in which we want to take this campaign, drawing from the words of Sayyid Saleh, where he said that our main aim and goal should be to prepare the grounds and ourselves, especially the foundation of ourselves, for the zuhur of Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. And just by what Sayyid Abazar was saying, and I had never thought of it in this way before, but alhamdulillah, fruitful discussions like this do engage our mind to think and reflect and contemplate even more, was that if the world has so much hatred towards those who say that they are the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, what it makes us think of the animosity that the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, will face when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows him to reappear. So we kind of can think about the extent of hatred that will be there at that time, and it sort of also puts the ghaiba into context as well as to how much hatred, and we have to open our eyes and see exactly what we need to do of the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And right now the Shia of Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif, we have to align ourselves with his mission and always think about what he would do in this situation. And obviously the points about the media, it is our biggest weapon. We have to think about how we can utilize this, inshallah, to align ourselves. Sister Medina, you beautifully explained how on an intellectual level and in the type of academic level, we can support our brothers and sisters around the world and raise more awareness about Shia genocide. And inshallah, I do wish as a campaign and myself to work with all of you in the future in order to bring something practical and tangible from this discussion, inshallah, in the service of the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. Again, thank you to everybody who has attended this session. Please do follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages for many more fruitful discussions such as this, inshallah. I would like to thank Syed Abbas for hosting the program today. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. And inshallah, now we will end with Dua al-Faraj, which will be recited by Sayyid Abazar, to pray for the safety and reappearance of our beloved 12th Imam Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif, but also to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to be his supporters and his companions, even during his ghaiba, even before his reappearance, so that he views us as one of his companions, as the ones who are setting the foundation for his zuhur. So Bismillah, Sayyid Abazar, please could you recite Dua al-Faraj, and inshallah we shall see you all again soon. Sayyidina, I think you're muted.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي عظم البلاء وبرح الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وضاقت الأرض ومنعت السماء وأنت المستعان وإليك المشتكى وعليك المعول في الشدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذين فرضت علينا طاعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم، ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب. يا محمد يا علي يا علي يا محمد اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران. يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الغوث 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 أدركني أدركني أدركني. الساعة الساعة العجال 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 يا أرحم الراحمين بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Jazakumullah khair, Sayyidina. Thank you so much. Please keep us in your du'as, and please keep in your du'as the safety and the health of our Imam and all of the Muslims and all of the people suffering all around the world, in Palestine, in Iraq, in China, in Kashmir, in whichever country anybody is facing oppression and tyranny. Please keep them in your du'as, and inshallah pray for the tawfiq and the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah sharif. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.